Welcome back to another episode of the Frustrated CEO podcast. My name is Patrick Lyons. I am one of your co-hosts, and I'm here with two of my friends and colleagues. First and foremost, Patsy Freeman. Patsy, welcome to you.
Thank you. Today's going to be a very engaging show.
I agree. And our other partner in crime, Leb Tanema. Leb, how are you, sir?
I am really good and really excited to work with Chris.
Yes, you always steal my thunder. Gosh. You told everybody we're going to have Chris on today. All right, let me get to the details. Our guest today is Chris Sarles. Now, Chris was raised in the Northwest and is a graduate of Oregon State University. He's married to Liz for 33 years and has two sons, Nathan and Henry, and a 2-year-old grandson. Chris's career was spent in a variety of roles in the alcoholic beverage industry, from owning a small beer and wine distributor that he started in 1986, and then continuing with a series of mergers and acquisitions that led to managing parts of Columbia Distributing and Young's Market Company of Oregon, which are two of the largest family-owned beer and wine and spirits companies in the 10 Western states. The pinnacle of his career, Chris joined Oregon Fruit Products as CEO and president in 2014. Where in addition to managing the business, Chris was actively working with the legislature on issues facing the industry. He led the company through major investments and upgrades in equipment, a massive relocation, product diversification, and expanding into new global markets. So we are excited to introduce you, our listener, to Chris Sarles. Chris, welcome to the Frustrated CEO podcast.
Thank you, Patrick. It is great to be with you guys. I look forward to a lot of fun conversation today.
Yeah, it's going to be good. Now, Chris, one minor detail that I may have left out when introducing you is that you actually retired from Oregon Fruit Products just a few months ago, if I'm not mistaken, October 2020, late 2022, correct?
That's correct.
Correct. Okay. So as a listener, you may be wondering, what is the intent of our show today? Well, Chris is in that post-career transition of the next phase of life. So our plan today is to cover a couple of different areas. First, we want to pick Chris's brain, talk about his experiences as CEO, and there are many, and then talk about what was the plan. How did you transition from CEO, from leader into how did you create your plan and execute now your plan into the post-career transition phase? So let's start with your time and experience as a leader. In a leadership career that spans several decades, is there one highlight that comes to mind as something that you are most proud of?
Yeah, I think that I would focus in, it would be people. It'd be the growing, the development, the nurturing, and watching the success of those around me over all of the years. I think that's what I take the most pride in.
Talk about that. As you know, developing people. How, as CEO, a lot of CEOs, clearly you have your own direct report team. Was that primarily where your focus was? Let me develop this immediate leadership team, and then they will develop the rest of the organization? Or did you have a focus of, I want to develop this whole? What was your approach?
I would say I've been very fortunate that my experiences spanned all sorts of different sizes of companies, as well as different seasons of those companies. My early years were when I started a business out of college, which was an alcohol beverage distributor. And, it was that place where you're the chief bottle washer, janitor, warehouseman, banker, salesperson, cheerleader, all of those, through to an organization such as Young's Market here in the Northwest, where you were dealing with hundreds of people on a team. And then finally in this last season, a company that was in significant amount of transition at that point when I joined. So each of those have had a sort of a different feel to them and given me a different opportunity to work with different levels within the organization. And I would say that I never have really focused on my direct reports in that sense. I've usually gone down line and made sure that the team understood how much I cared first, because people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so for me, that's always been a calling card, to start and to hear what's going on in the organization, to see where people are having hurdles, impediments, things that are in their way, that I could work with them to help solve. Not to do the work, but to ask questions of them so that they too could get the experience of creating a solution. And so I think that's sort of the how I've done that. And that's been at all levels and sort of in different functions, whether that was in sales or operations or finance. They just took maybe a different look through what were the questions we were trying to solve for.
So Chris, that to me, being that you are a top executive, maybe you could share a little bit about that approach such that people are not intimidated, like, oh, Chris is here, I'm talking to the top executive. His questions are actually, have good purpose or meaningful purpose in the business and, in my development itself. Because, some leaders do focus on just their leadership team, or they're not quite sure, or they only meet with their people in town halls or, larger communication venues. Can you talk a little bit more about kind of walking around and having people be comfortable talking with you?
Yeah, I mean, I would hope that even as we do this conversation today, you might get a bit of a sense of me. And what I've always tried to be is very, very approachable and affable. I care. I care about what we're doing here today in the same way that I cared about my work. I always want to work towards excellence. But in doing that, in working with people, I've always just tried to approach it in a very laid back way, trying to find out a little bit about them, their families, them, what they're doing, before diving into that question of, that might be work related. And so I would say that the great compliment that I feel right now is that some of the people that I'm texting with even today are people from the plant floor at Oregon Fruit, just saying, hey, boss, miss ya. Things are going great here, but just wanted to touch base. And to me, that's a great full, circle cycle that says, it really does work. Because it's not a thing. It has to be sincere. It has to be heartfelt and intentional in order for people to feel it that way, or they'll just see through something and say, the next time you come in strong and hard, they're thinking, oh, there we go. Now I see, who this person really is. And so I've tried to be in my work life and my home life. I look at it like parenting. There's a consistency that if you're consistent in all your actions at home and at work, people know what to expect. So that really doesn't make them fearful of where are they coming from when we do sit down and talk. What you see in this conversation today is what you got at the office, 6 months ago.
I'm curious because literally just this morning, I had a very similar conversation with a CEO who is excellent at getting out and walking around, but also talking about how not everybody on this CEO's team shares that same ability or desire. Did you encounter that? You're clearly setting the example for your team. To your point, you get out, walk around, not spend all my time with my directs. Did you ever encounter anyone on your leadership team who that wasn't their natural ability? How did you, was that okay? Or did you set that as an expectation? How did you coach that?
Well, certainly it would start in the hiring process, and there are certain things that would look for in who those leaders would be, and making sure that it was at least at some level there, that it might have need to be developed, built on, encouraged, enhanced. And so it didn't have to be perfect, but the expectation is that that's what people would do. So my hope was always that if someone wasn't quite to where we thought together that they needed to be, we would sort of put together a personal sort of improvement plan that would say, hey, let's work on this together. And if it requires, if you're not comfortable with me and we need an outside resource to do that, for you to get, really loose and be able to share what's holding you back, that's okay. Or if it's me and you're comfortable in sharing, let me give you what has worked for me and see if you can incorporate some of that into how you do it.
Thank you.
But still the
Yes, that's great.
expectation, expectation would be that we would work that way throughout the organization, because that's how people feel like there's transparency, authenticity, and it makes it be a place that people want to work.
Chris, this will be a fairly broad question, but since this is the frustrated CEO, what were some of the things, let's go back to the first career. What were some of the things that did frustrate you there, and some of the ways you maybe succeeded in overcoming that?
You bet. I think that my wife has been a great coach along the way in reminding me that not everyone strives for the same level of excellence, and that doesn't need to be there, as long as we're all on the same team. We're doing the job. We're living our values together. Their level of commitment may just look a little different than mine. So I think that early on, I had a little bit of trouble with folks who kind of came and gave, I'm just joking when I say this, but gave 80% or 90%. I'm thinking, come on, let's go 110, right? Let's really give. But I think over time, through, again, even subtle comments through fellow leaders who said, hey, here's maybe a blind spot for you. Here's where you can improve. And then trying to go to school on that myself to get better. That constant, for me, it's, you just never stop learning. And whether it's learning from you today in this conversation through the questions you ask that might make me go off and be a little more introspective, or if it's from learning from fellow workers or other folks.
Thank you. That's awesome. I love that you mentioned that even leaders have blind spots. And coaches can come from many places.
For sure. Yeah.
And you're busting a lot of the myths of leadership. One of them being leaders have to have all the answers and have to be a finished product, right? So you've just, in the first 12 minutes busted that one all up. Oh.
Yeah. Another thought with that, I would just say, is that I've always tried to remember that this has nothing to do with me. Mm-hmm. It has everything to do with the team and the company. And so if you put yourself aside and remember what your role is there in terms of providing a vision, setting the course, and then helping kind of pull people along, it's amazing what gets done. And it's amazing to watch the enthusiasm that gets created when people have a shared and common vision that we're working toward.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, I know right now, I'm thinking of one individual I'm working with who is a CEO right now, who has never created a vision before and is new to being a CEO. So here you are in this industry of two different industries, really. Do you have any thoughts about or recommendations about how to go about creating a vision that people can buy into and get excited about?
Yeah, I think for me, I would say it's twofold. It's the business and it's the people. And so there's one where we're going to set the vision for the business. And you do that, I think, through just looking at the landscape of the industry you're in to determine where are the opportunities, where are the gaps that other people aren't filling, and how can you provide a unique solution that provides an opportunity for margin by being differentiated instead of someone that is just doing what everyone else does and you're slugging it out at low margins. But identifying what those things are, for me, is how I would then set the vision, because the vision would then be to see how are we going to close those gaps? How are we going to work towards that as a team in building the company? And then separately, on the people front, for a vision, it's to me, it starts with a vision, a mission, and core values. And so to me, being able to authentically lead with our values, every day, and to work them into each and every conversation and meeting that we have, to me, that helped everyone else have confidence in that. If we lived those and we were working together towards the shared vision, we had much greater success because it was a transparent, it's on the walls throughout our building: trust, respect. All of our values, it spells tricks: trust, respect, integrity, commitment, collaboration, and stewardship. And then we would weave that into everything we would do, because people, when they see it being lived, they're more apt to get behind the vision that you set of where you're going to take the company.
Yeah, that's great. So when you moved over to the position you just left, that organization had a storied, long history, right, in the Salem area, and core values that have been embedded for a long time. Just interested in, for someone else who might transition into another company, how do you embrace, or do you ever change any of that, walking in as a leader in a company with a long history?
Yeah, I have incredible respect for the Gaylor family that started Oregon Fruit Products in 1935, and they ran it seamlessly until 2011, when it was just time. There was no succession. It was time to sell. And there was another local family, the Miletus family, that wanted to carry forward the tradition of this iconic, Salem company. So when walking in, I can say it wasn't easy, because the values had never been stated. They were just felt. So there wasn't anything that was being, when I say they were being lived, for sure, what a wonderful family, but it had never been part of how they built the business plan and executed it with the team. So the first thing that I did is I came in and with the leadership team, we created a vision, mission, and values, and said, look, let's not worry, and I've still said it to this day with what's on the walls there, let's not worry if it's great. Let's make sure it's just really good. And then we can worry about adjusting it over time if we need to. Let's just get everybody on the same page. Let's make sure we understand what we stand for, how we're going to treat one another. And let's have that shared vision of where we're going to go. And then let's go get busy, right? And that's what we did. So walking in was not a particular easy thing, because my style and that approach had not been what had been done before. So as an example, I came in and there wasn't just a lot of, I'll call it training, if you like, about the company, not about my role. And so subsequent to that, now every employee that gets hired goes through a tour of learning. And that tour of learning is a multi-day process that people spend time talking with each aspect of the business. They learn who their kids are, where they live, what they do, and then, oh, by the way, what do you do for the company, and how might I interact with you? So that tour of learning has been something that has really helped. And I did it as a result of me not getting that tour, but rather leading with my forehead and a helmet, just trying to figure out my way around in that first 6 months or so.
Oh, that's great.
It was good.
Yeah.
So, Chris, I know right after this call, or right after we record this episode, you are you're on to your next meeting is a mentoring meeting, if I'm not mistaken. Talk about the role of mentoring. Obviously, it's something that you value. You're still doing it now, even post-career. As CEO, or as even again, your early career, was that something that you sought out? Was it something that you did you spend time both as a mentor and a mentee? What was the role of, or is that just something that has developed now that you have more time because you don't have to go to work every day?
It has been a really significant and important part of my life. I could probably get, a little half emotional going through it because of the role that it's played in my life. And it started with, as a kid, with a role that a sister may have played or a relative played in helping form who I am at my core, and help develop values and, just gave me a little bit of perspective to the world in caring for others, et cetera, things that I hold, very dear today. And then as I went further and got out of college, even the first two people that were my mentors, I subsequently ended up speaking at, a eulogy as they died, unfortunately young. But those men did such incredible things for me and to me and with me through their gift of leaning in and breathing into me, their life experiences, their business experiences, their family experiences. And so so incredible. And what I took from that is that I've always looked to have upline and downline mentors, or might say mentor mentee. So, I look and say my kids are how I stay current with technology and what's going on around how to not be the 58-year-old dork, and so they work with me very freely, I might add, on how to avoid some of those things. And there's many others as well, even their friends who, as they're in business today, I get to talk to them and do a little kind of coaching with them. And then right back, they come to me with interesting insights. And then up on the upside, I've always looked and had people that were probably up to 20 years older than me as part of my mentor program. And that really, if I transitioned in the answer to that, it's really what led me to why I'm sitting here today. Because when I was 28 years old, at 58 now, one of those mentors gave me a book that just struck me, and it was called Halftime by Bob Buford, Going from a Life of Success to a Life of Significance.
Yeah.
And from that time and from reading that, I really spent the next 28 years building that plan and executing that plan so that I could move from being a taker to being a giver. And even though I know that people would tell you that I've been giving through the work that I do in terms of how I've built and developed people, and they're so thankful for that, they tell me, but on the other side, you're working for money and, that. And really what I wanted to do was try and get to that place 28 years later where I could transition out and be someone who could give back in the same way that all those people so freely gave of themselves to me in my first part of my life. So that's the role of a mentor, giving me that book. I've subsequently probably given it out for, at least 50 times and shared, if you don't start with the end in mind, you're going to get wherever you go. But if you set an end and you think about where it is that you want to be, and then you just consistently work towards that and check in with yourself with milestones. And these aren't just financial goals. They can be, just the personal development, the people development, all of those things that ultimately, when you wake up and you lift your head and you go, holy cow, I'm there. And so that's what allowed me to get to this place, was seeing the end of that goal that I had set and being able to finally execute it.
Wow.
So how did you, for the leader who's listening, who has thought about a mentor or never thought about a mentor, but has wanted one, or after everything you just said, now wants one, how did you go about choosing a mentor?
I think sometimes it's hard because as a CEO, or even if you're just anyone, right? You don't have to be a leader to have a mentor at all, or be a mentee. And so in that, I think it's the notion of being bold enough to know what you want, look for people who are good at what it is you want, and ask them. They'll be honored and flattered that someone thinks that they know enough to help you. And so, I've just never been shy to say that every encounter, including today's conversation with you, every encounter is an opportunity to learn. And if you don't enter the conversation thinking that you're going to learn, then you're missing an opportunity in everything we do. And so for me, that notion of figuring out what it was that I thought I was looking for, finding people who I thought were good at it, and then saying, hey, how about a cup of coffee? I have some questions. You seem uniquely gifted at an area that I'm not, and I'd love to learn from you. Would you invest in me?
Yeah.
That's
Of
great.
course.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
That's excellent. It's funny. I know halftime, and this shift from success to significance. I've been around a few exits, not really as a mentee or a mentor, but to some degree as a friend or a coach. And so much attention is paid to, like, you've reached some place if you retire, like you can actually retire. But the ones that I've been around reach that place and still get scared. Like, what am I going to do? Like, how much golf can I golf, and how much tennis can I play, and how much time can I spend at home, and because you've been building this successful career. Do you have any any words of wisdom, anything to say about? And I've also been with exits that had a vision and a strategy and still got reluctant and jumped back into the workplace, or stayed longer than they really intended to stay or needed to stay.
Well, I think if I remember a couple of things, one about all that has been done for me, again, it is, for me, it's been that the desire to get onto this next season because there was a plan. So I think my encouragement to someone would be to say, start with the end in mind. What is it that you want in this next season of your life? Is it that you want to get to be a one handicap? Or is it that you want to give back? Is it that you want to see 100 countries? What is it that's important to you? And then back into how you're going to achieve that. And if you're a CEO, or even just pick any role, if you're there, you're probably pretty good at executing against plans. So why don't you have a personal plan? Because those that get done and go off into the sunset, you're going to be greeted with the grim reality, which is there's not a lot out there to just playing golf and waking up and doing that. I mean, I think that for driven folks, not having a plan wouldn't be acceptable. You have to have the plan to where you're going next. So that's my feeling. And so keep in mind, I'm out of the role 90 days. I don't claim to be an expert. I'm humble enough to say that I might eat my words. But what I do see is I have a plan of what I'm doing. And I've shared a little bit with you kind of as a start. So I think that knowing where that's going helps me feel confident that I won't feel that kind of emptiness or lack of purpose.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I definitely want to dig into what that plan is, how you built it. There was a lot of thought given to it. In fact, it's why I reached out to you in the first place. We have a mutual friend that was talking. He was relaying to me what that plan is, how you built it, and how you're executing it, and just thought it was really interesting. So maybe that's a good opportunity to transition into. Okay, tell us about the plan.
Sure. Yeah. What I would say is that it's not for everyone. My wife reminds me that I might stop telling people that I have a PowerPoint of the retirement plan, but I do, and it's how I think, right? So really, my plan that all again part of halftime was to I wanted to spend 6 months as I was done working on my health, fitness, decompressing, and I'm really being diligent about that, not jumping into what the next part of my plan is. And it's really hard because I want to get going, but I know that this is healthy after whatever the number of years is, 40 years of work or more. And so I get to the end of the 6 months, and then for the next 6 months, I have 6 nonprofits that all surround women and children, poverty, addiction, and abuse. And my plan is I'm going to go work through those, each of them over the course of 6 months, spending time, in the trenches. And my goal is to see, do I believe in the work they do? Do I believe I have a skill that can add to them? And then lastly, do I like the people? And so as I go through these 6, my plan then is to enter 2024 with 2 of them that I go give to kind of full-time, call it a full-time volunteering in the trenches. I don't want to do board work. I don't want to do fundraising at this time. I really want to just go in and help make a difference with women and children in those situations who just need a hand up. They're not looking for a handout. They're just looking for someone to believe in them and to get them started on, a new track, a new trajectory in their life after maybe it taken a turn they never wanted. So that's the plan.
That's awesome. Now I have to ask, core values obviously play into how you chose the 6 that you chose, and there's that common thread of women and children in need of, and you said addiction. Where does that come from?
For me, it starts with my faith, and my faith is a very central point in my life. And so, we know that women and children throughout Scripture are the ones that need to be cared for, and so it starts there with me. And I think of the values of the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. Those to me are those values that I want to live through the work. And I'll know I've done the right work if people can see those things as a result of the work that I do. But I tie that back to my faith.
It's awesome.
So you've just talked about, I've never thought of a transition plan as a milestone or a milepost on a life plan, which is you're inspiring me here to see that. So you're talking about your 12-month transition out of, after you've been out of work. What was the transition plan to get you to, 90 days ago as you transitioned out of the organization?
I have the family that I've worked with for all these years that own the bulk of Oregon Fruit. They've been so incredibly good to work with. And so I was able to have very honest dialogue with them, expressing to them what this plan looked like. And so they were supportive, as they've always been, for me to do that. So it really, the plan was make sure that I was aligned with them on timing. And then there's a funny thing that happened. I think it's called COVID. And so, that threw everything off in terms of timing, where we had to kind of just like bear down and grind down again to keep going. And then we surfaced. And from there, it was the active recruitment of a successor that I was a part of to try and find the right person who would lead the organization with some, I would say, maybe the non-negotiables. We would find that in the person, but then recognizing that the person who was going to come in, if we hired the right successor, it'd be somebody who's going to do all sorts of things a lot better than me. And that I was the right guy at the season of the company as we were evolving it, but recognizing that as we moved to pick a number, I'll leave revenues out, but it was a time when someone else with a different skill set would probably take the business and really catapult it forward, but not losing sight of people and the very essence of our values in the process. So it was a process of going on a search, finding that person, and lo and behold, the person was sort of right under our nose, so to speak, versus where we started on a national search. It turned out to be a person on our board who raised their hand and said, I'm in. And so that made my transition actually faster than I anticipated. I thought I might have been there through the end of the year, but based upon his familiarity with so much about the business, the people, the values, we were able to transition literally in about 2 weeks. I mean, that's unheard of, length of time, unless a CEO's been ousted, right? I mean, then you have no overlap. But
Right.
In this case, it was pretty fast.
So I'm curious, and maybe the familiarity made this easier as well. But when you think of any transition plan successor coming in, the one who is transitioning out plays an important role in setting that new person up for success. How you treat them, how you talk about them, how you support him or her. How did you set your successor up for success?
Yeah, I think that in every interaction from the moment I started talking about, once I was public, which was very late in the process, I was just so complimentary of him, and it wasn't false. It wasn't made up. I believe in this new leader. So I used every opportunity in front of our teams, in kind of we do all company videos where we give a quarterly update on what's happening in the business, and do it via video so that the swing shift can see it in the graveyard kind of timing. And so I just made sure everybody knew that I believed we had hand selected this person. This is a very talented person who brings a different skill set, and that the company's probably going to do really cool, new, great things with the new leader. And then for me, as you transition, just to remember that, hey, when you were there and your title was CEO, you made decisions. So drop your ego as you go out the door, because anything that happens there forward is someone else and their vision of where it's going. And so just to remember, you just got to let it go. You may not agree with everything, but I certainly believe in everything that they're doing, in the work they're doing. They just may do it differently.
I feel like that advice, check your ego at the door. First of all, we've heard that in a number of our other episodes. It's a common theme, I think, for successful leaders. But I feel like you mentioned it there, but I've heard that in other answers or other, even from you in earlier parts of the conversation. It's about the people. It's not about me. You said, put yourself aside. You said earlier that's a hard thing for a leader to do, especially a CEO, especially a senior leader, to put the ego aside. But it really can get in the way of a lot of what you're talking about.
Yes. And I would say that if you asked, I'm not sure whether it would be my wife, my kids, or coworkers, I am not suggesting I'm not without ego.
Sure.
Right. I mean, I think anytime you do things, you begin to feel good about that. Right. But I really try and stomp it down. And again, remember why we're doing this work and who's doing the work, and really what are we trying to do in growing and developing and building people in the process.
Right.
Caring for people.
But it also sounds like so it's, yes, check my ego at the door, but that's also the role of your mentor. It's the role of a wife/coach to help you see and know when, you might need to a little bit of humble pie here and there. So
Mhm.
Well,
Yeah,
and I
sure.
can appreciate what you're saying in terms of, I mean, we're talking about you leaving your CEO role, but anybody, anytime a leader transitions from one role to the next, I mean, we're working, you know, as you step up, especially into more executive, you have to leave part of that behind for the next person to take up that responsibility. So there's a lot of opportunities in a growing organization to leave your ego at the door.
Mhm.
There are, and my encouragement, if you were, I use the word from an organizational chart only. If you're, at a lower level in the organization, you can do all the exact same things we just talked about in this, which is start with
Yes.
the end in mind.
Mhm.
Where do you want to go? Who are you going to build as your support network? How are you going to make sure that you're your own greatest champion without being arrogant, but making sure that you're there and sharing why you should be considered for these opportunities, and sharing your vision for yourself with maybe a level 2 manager above that who says, holy cow, I've got somebody who has a plan for their career. Sign me up.
Mm.
Right? Who wouldn't love to have that? And so the encouragement would be at any level in the organization, set your goals, set your next step, and then figure out who can help support you and help you achieve it, even though at the end of the day you've got to do it. But it never hurts to have a couple of allies around you who believe in you to allow you to achieve that.
Yep.
Right. Right. Going back to COVID, since you mentioned it, then COVID starts to ease up. Did you have a plan with, like, maybe people who aren't on the floor, whether they work remote or not? Were there challenges that maybe, I think some of the CEOs and leaders we talked to today are still somewhat challenged by, like, what's going to work? What's the right mix? What's the right thing to do? How did you, as a people-oriented leader, come to those conclusions and decisions?
Well, a couple of thoughts on it. We were an essential business as a food manufacturer, so we never closed our doors one day.
Yep.
So we dealt with a different kind of challenge there, which was, we did something where we sent every other cube area home so that we could keep the 6 feet distance. So you'd have, an accounts receivable person in seat 1, and then seat 2 would have been at home that week, and then seat 3 was there, right? So we kept that distance. And really at the end, I never wavered from the fact that I believe in office, human contact, interaction, and engagement is where the work happens. And it's all about people. So I never let anyone think for a moment that at some point we would be entertaining a remote workplace. That was just never part of the conversation. And so as we came back out of COVID, everyone understood they were just waiting for the email that said, we're all back and in our offices together. So that would be my strategy, I would say, was to make sure that people didn't think that on the other side of this, we might continue with that, because my belief, again, that the best work is done when we're together. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Yep. I understand.
So we haven't talked about, I haven't, at least if I have the word culture, but what I hear you describing there is you have a culture, you've built a culture of togetherness. I mean, you needed to stay together because you had fruit to process and packages to get out the door, but that is different than this people culture of togetherness.
Well, and the next, I've had a couple of people on the team who loved the quip that I will say, and I had a few others who thought it just really was,
Yep.
But really, it starts with a culture of we care. It not a culture of togetherness, any of that. It was just a culture of we care.
Excellent.
And if we all truly care about one another, and we understand that we all have each other's backs through thick and thin, Doesn't mean we're not going to encounter some really difficult times, ugly times. But if we can trust one another that we're living those values, it really means that you can put 100% of your energy into the business, and you don't have to give 10% looking over your shoulder, because then somebody can only give 90%. Right. And so I want to make sure that people can give their very best and not wonder what's going on in the politics that I need to really kind of be aware of so I don't get blindsided.
So if you were to make that practical, we want a culture of we care. How do you, what were some of the specific, is it policies or approaches or steps that you take to do that?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably so basic that I don't know. And that's, hey, try caring, right? Try caring. Spend time with people, find out why they tick and what makes them tick. And just engage with folks. And so I think that's the basis of it. And, again, the bigger the company it becomes, the more difficult that is from a CEO level, but maybe something that I was able to do based upon the season of the business. We grew the business 400% over the time that I was there. So we grew a ton, but we were able to keep that culture. We didn't necessarily get to the end number that I would have loved to have gotten to, but the new team will. But we did great things. We grew our employee count as well as just the size of the business.
And you attribute that to creating a culture of we care?
Yeah, and I would, again, a little further into it is having a clear vision, mission, and values, setting goals together, making sure that there's transparency and that we're measuring against those goals and reporting out to the company about where we are, so that nobody's ever wondering, how are we doing? And that, I think, that full circle of creating the goals, measuring towards them, celebrating, all of that really plays to a place that I hope created an environment that people wanted to be.
It's great.
Chris, did you ever have, I don't know if directive is the right word, but things that the board felt you should do that you felt you shouldn't do or wouldn't do?
Boy, I hear that in sort of a loaded way of, and the answer is no. I mean, the board that I've worked with, family and a couple of outside advisors, just great people.
Yeah.
There were places where I chose a different path than maybe they were thinking we would go, but they weren't directive saying go this way. And I thought it was necessarily like, oh no, this is crazy. It might have been that we just took a little different take on it than where they were headed or wanted to head. And I think that, again, comes from maybe the amount of time that we had spent working together. There was also a trust level that we shared together that's unique. And I'm really proud and happy to have had that with them at a place that not everyone's going to get as a CEO, because you may be the hired guy who comes in and you've only been there 2 years and you knew no one, that you're not going to have that same level of, I guess, ability to shape and move the business as maybe I did have the ability to.
Yeah. So it sounds like the culture of caring for each other and the business was also at the board level.
Yeah, in a different way. They still, at the end of the day, have, great expectations that might not in the same way embody those same level of care that we would do throughout the organization. But we all were on the same page about where we wanted to take the business and to honor the legacy of the Gaylor family and to see this become a company that lasts for generations to come.
Yes. So in golf, if you want to redo, they call it a mulligan, right? Is there anything you can think of that you would like to have a mulligan for? And maybe what you would do differently?
Yeah, for sure. I think that it took me longer than I wish it took me to recognize maybe the deeper level of care that I needed to show and to be a part of with team for it to be even more powerful and to have the impact. So it was in my early days, probably until I was, gosh, maybe the first 10 years of my career, I didn't do that as well as I could. I did it, but not at the same level. And then I think through coaching of my wife and others, there's sometimes the most wonderful reality checks, that and some longtime employees who pointed out, hey, just pause a little bit, maybe go a little deeper before you need to head into the conversation that you're ultimately looking to have. So I wish I could, maybe have done that a little differently, but it also shaped me into who I am today. So I look at it as a lesson that I can now share with others.
Yeah. No, thank you. And I mean, I really ask it for our listeners, right? Because there are always going to be learnings and things you look back on and say, oh, if I'd acted faster, if I, cared more deeply, or whatever the case may be. So I think it's good that they hear it from you.
Beautiful.
How about diversity? You must have worked with a diverse group of people.
Yeah, definitely. In the first years of the business, in the alcohol beverage business, not very diversified. But where I got to experience the diversity certainly came in my time in Oregon Fruit, and in all sorts of different ways that diversity showed up in our business. So again, if I could go back in time, I wish we as a society had probably become more cognizant of that earlier and taken steps earlier to get to where we are today, and still need to go. It's been a slow thing.
Yes, it has been.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Well, any other questions from my colleagues before we turn our focus to getting practical? Patsy, it looked like you had a question. No?
No.
Okay. Leb?
Nothing comes to mind immediately.
Okay. Well, we're not revoking your right to ask additional questions. But this is the portion of every show where we try to give our leaders, our listeners, an opportunity, some takeaways, some key takeaways, practical things that they can do to try to make progress, try to make inroads in their own organizations. Either, I think, usually based on what we've talked about today. So today there's, creating a culture of we care. There's a whole lot of different things we've talked about. And also to be thinking about what are some practical steps they should be thinking about they can take today to start preparing for that post-career phase. So, Chris, we can let you go first, and that way we don't take all the good ones. Or if you'd rather us go first, and then you can kind of circle in with your thoughts at the end. I'll leave that to you. How would you like us to proceed?
I'll offer up a couple of thoughts, and really, I feel like in a way that's sort of what I've done for the last bit of this conversation. So I hate to repeat things, but I think that the one piece that to remember to get traction faster is that the team has the answers. So go get the answers. Go meet with the people where the answers are, instead of thinking you need to bring them the answers, because that collaborative nature will certainly also increase the buy-in together when you've created the plan together. And I think that sometimes leaders think that they need to bring it and say, thou shalt, boom, right? Here's what we're going to do. So I think that would be my add to some of the things that I've already said today.
That's great.
Yep, it is.
Yeah. Any others you want to add before we take a shot at it?
no, but pulling your card, I might reserve the right to bring one more in at the end.
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. We'll circle back and give you an opportunity at the end. Lev or Patsy? Who would like? Patsy, why don't you go? You good?
I'm good. The one I'm looking at that I wrote down is leave your CEO or any leadership ego at the door as you transition from one, phase to the other, whether it's within an organization or to the next season of your life. Have a great support system. Have coaches wherever you find them in your life available to support you and help point out your blind spots, because even leaders, CEOs have blind spots. Which then goes back to one of my favorite, is be open to learning. If you're not open to learning, you're not open to hearing your blind spots. So those are mine. There were so many good ones, Chris. So
yes.
I'll stop there.
Lev, you want to go or you want me to go?
Okay. Yeah, I'll go through my 3 pages.
Yeah.
I think it was really valuable to hear you talk, Chris, about visioning for the business and the people. And the way you articulated that, I think is really valuable potentially for leaders who aren't feeling great about the vision, or they've inherited a vision, or they don't understand how important the people and the business piece are. So I love that. Make sure that you're living the values. And if they're inferred and never been written, write them.
Yeah, that was a
Maybe
good
write the behaviors that go with them, so people understand how to live the values in the company. And I heard that is really important. I love the notion of onboarding new employees with a tour of learning. And I've never heard it talked about with that language. So everybody who's in this kind of war for talent is struggling with onboarding. So I hope our leaders who are listening can say, whoa, that's a great idea, and something that they can capitalize on. And the last one is just simply go down line. Don't just hang out at whatever level of leader you are. Move around, go down line, go up line, get to know people.
I like it. All right. So I'll add a few. It's kind of been a theme throughout here, and I mentioned it already. Really work to create a culture of we care, whatever that looks like for your organization. But it doesn't guarantee that there won't be any issues. But Chris, you said a culture of we care enables people to put 100% of their energy toward their work, and it's as simple as just, show you care. So thought that was really good. In terms of creating your transition plan, tap into your core values. Look to your core values to guide you as you're creating that plan, so that whatever it is that you are stepping into post-career, in that give back phase, that significance phase, it will align with who you are and what matters to you. I liked, right off the bat, you were talking about work to be approachable and affable. Get out, meet the people, find out about their families, take an active interest. And it is okay to set the expectation for your team to follow suit. You are leading by example, but ask your leadership team to get out and do the same thing. And then I'll end with this one. I have so many, but I'll end with this one. And it's where you started, Chris, that to a leader who's listening, the highlight of your leadership career should be your people. And if it's not, then maybe the question to ask right now would be, why isn't it? And how do I fix that? How do I change that? I just thought that was a really great place to start, and for me, a great place to end. my portion. I'm not ending the show. So, Chris, were there any others that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think the last one that I would add to that is this notion of doesn't have to do anything with work, and it can have everything to do with work. But that is simply that every encounter that you have is an opportunity to learn And that learning can be just little things in life, right? But it may be a little different take on what you already know about X, Y, or Z. And it's an opportunity for us to show people through those interactions that we care by listening, hearing what they have to say. And in that, it's always amazing what you walk away with if you pay attention to those encounters.
Very good.
That's really good.
Patsy or Leb, any more you wanted to add?
I have one more. Chris, you said that sincerity builds trust, and then you added plus consistency. And I think those two qualities don't always necessarily hang out together. And I have been with executives who are sincerely inconsistent. The trust is harder to build. So I just couldn't help but highlight those two qualities.
Or maybe consistently insincere.
That too. Yeah, that's the other way.
Also a problem. Yeah. Patsy, any more?
No, I'm good.
All right. Chris, thank you so much for spending time with us, bringing your insights and wisdom to our leaders who are leading today, but also I'm sure have that end in mind and are thinking about that transition phase and how it might look and how they might go about it the right way. So thank you for that. It's been a joy and an honor. If anybody is interested in, I mean, I know you're kind of out of the work scene, but if anybody is interested in contacting you, or how do people stay current with what's going on in this phase of life for you? Or is it pretty much
you can follow me on Instagram, but no. You can call my cell at 503-341-5700 or an email of chris.sarles64@gmail.com. And I would welcome the opportunity to discuss any of these things with anyone, show you documents that I've used over the years. I'm happy to provide any of that. And it's all free. It's just the give back.
That's awesome. Well, let me say this. If you have anything that you think is valuable to a listener, and we can put that right on the website along with this episode. So listener, along with this episode's Let's Get Practical that we just talked about, you can download this and every Let's Get Practical from our website at thefrustratedceo.com. Chris, thank you so much. It was really great to have you.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to share with you guys. And thanks for the great questions that made me think about this whole journey that I've been on. I really appreciate it.
Excellent. Leb, Patsy, final word?
Thank you.
Been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, listener, we will.
Go Beavers.
What's that?
Go Beavers.
Go Beavers. Go Oregon State. Yes. Listener, thank you for sticking with us to the end of another episode of the Frustrated CEO podcast. As I mentioned, you can find us. You can find all of us on LinkedIn and all of our information out at thefrustratedceo.com. So we will see you next time on the show.